Good evening, everybody. Last chance for a cup of coffee, or I think there's like 4 grapes left. And there's a few cookies, a couple strawberries. So fortify yourselves for this evening. All right. Well, here we are in Matthew's Gospel, and we are in the 12th chapter. I had every hope of finishing the 12th chapter last time, but that didn't happen. We'll see if I get through it this time, with every hope that maybe we'll launch into the 13th chapter, but don't hold me to it. All right, let's pray. Thanks, oh God, for this evening and for the chance we have to enjoy good food and to be at these tables and to have our Bibles open and to study your word. We pray, oh God, that you will surround us with your Holy Spirit, fill us with your Holy Spirit, give us eyes to see through your Holy Spirit what your word is saying to us. Help us to not only study, but to appropriate this word such that we would be transformed by the renewing of our minds and that we would become more and more your disciples. And we ask this in Jesus' name. Amen. Okay, you may remember that last week we spent some time kind of setting up the framework for the 12th chapter, where Jesus and the Pharisees are having this dialogue over what is the intention of the law, and how Jesus and the religious leaders were seeing things differently, and that ultimately the law was intended for the well-being of people. The law is not there for the well-being of the law. The law is there for the well-being of people. And we have that push-pull thing, right, with the law. You know, we want to, everybody says it's a good idea to be a law-abiding citizen, but then when the law is not in our favor, then we sometimes take the law into our own hands, right? Which is what the Pharisees were worried about. Whoa, Jesus, you're taking the law into your own hands, and you're somehow watering down the law in order to adapt to the needs of human beings. And that gives Jesus the opportunity to say, whoa, it's the need of human beings that is at the core of who God is. You know, God so loved the world. Jesus looks out upon the crowds with the eyes of compassion, because at the centerpiece of God's relationship with the world is his care for his children, his children. And so the law is there is not there to push people down, it is there to raise people up. Not that there was anything wrong with the Sabbath. Remember, we talked about that last week, the Sabbath. You know, the Sabbath is there. Remember, we kind of gave a little sympathy to the religious leaders, the Pharisees and Sadducees and such, because they're there to maintain that framework for our lives, right? The law is there for a good reason, and the law is there for our well-being. But sometimes you can not see the forest through the trees, right? You cannot quite get what the real spirit of the law is, and so that's the dialogue that these two parties are having. And so, of course, the Sabbath is there for the welfare of human beings. Right? That's the gist of, that's the letter of the law, to honor the Sabbath day and to keep it holy. Not only is it to honor God, but as we discovered, the Sabbath is God's great gift to us, right? So when we're in this dialogue with God about the law, about the Sabbath, we're almost kind of looking at a gift horse in the mouth, right? God says, here's this precious gift. Just don't work on the Sabbath, because that's a gift for you. As I rested, so you get to rest. And as you rest, so you get to honor what my spirit and intention is for you human beings. But then all of a sudden we start dickering over what does it mean to rest and what does it not mean to rest, and so on and so forth. And all of us, so we either go one way or the other. We go all the way to one extreme where we say, well, it's not that important. You know what? Just it's all right, McConnell, for you to work 7 days a week. Mingy's giving me a dirty look over there because she knows I'm a Sabbath breaker all the time. So that's something you should pray for me. But neither are we to go all the other way to say, oh, you know what, poor guy's got a malady and we can't heal him because that might be working on the Sabbath. You see, we're missing the whole point, right? We're missing the whole point that God's given us this gift. And we need to find a way by which to receive the gift in the way in which it was intended for our well-being. The law is there for our well-being. You can get on I-75 here and you see the speed limit sign that says 70 miles an hour usually. And we could say, well, I can go faster than that. Yeah, you can. Things will probably be all right. But it's there for a reason. It's there for your well-being. Of course, I have this internal debate in my mind saying, no, it's not there for my well-being. My well-being is that I get somewhere faster than what the speed limit says, right? But we're missing the point, right? We're missing the whole intention. So that served to sort of be the framework for us as we looked at this dialogue that Jesus is having with the religious leaders, which continues on through this chapter, and it comes to this point where we left off, beginning at verse 33 of chapter 12. Jesus is continuing to have this dialogue with the scribes and the Pharisees, and he says, either make the tree good and its fruit good, or make the tree bad and its fruit bad. For the tree is known by its fruit. And then Jesus starts calling people names. You brood of vipers, how can you speak good things when you are evil? For out of the abundance of the heart the mouth speaks. The good person brings good things out of a good treasure, and the evil person brings evil things out of an evil treasure. I tell you, on the day of judgment, you will have to give an account for every careless word you utter. For by your words you will be justified, and by your words you will be condemned. Wow. That's serious stuff. But it all begins with this metaphor of fruit, right? Fruit. When you think of fruit, and you think of fruitful, you think of life-giving, that a good tree bears good fruit. A good tree is life-giving. A good tree seeks to uphold the well-being of those that visit that tree, of those who take from that tree. A bad tree bears bad fruit. It doesn't take long to quickly think about what bad fruit looks like, right? Spoiled, piece of fruit is just yee. Put it away, right? But to think about that as a metaphor for our daily living, that we get to be, as we make our way through life, we get to be one kind of fruit or the other. Remember that wonderful scene in The Wizard of Oz where they make their way through that apple orchard? Remember that? And they go to pick the apples, and what happens? The trees start to slap their hands and say, "You can't have our apples." And then they start throwing apples at at Dorothy and her gang. Well, that's an interesting analogy to think about. Well, how does our tree abide in our daily life? How willing are we allow others to pick from our fruit? And what kind of fruit would they be picking? And we can think about this in all sorts of different ways, right? You can think about it in very mundane encounters that we have day to day. The person checking you out at Publix, or the person that lives next door to you, or the person who you meet under the tree on Sunday morning. It can be, the person who is cutting your grass. I mean, the list is a million miles long, right, about all those people who somehow pass by our tree. And the question is, how close do we allow them to get to our fruit? And in picking it, what kind of fruit do they get? Do they get all the bad news? Do they get something bitter? Do they get something that is on its way to being spoiled? And that has a lot to do with just what our philosophy of life is, right? And our philosophy of life gets borrowed from who we are as followers of Jesus. To what degree am I impacted by the good news of Jesus Christ, the abundant life that Jesus offers, that sort of works its way into our roots and comes out into our limbs and becomes fruit for the world? Or are we very possessive of what God has given us? Are we possessive of our talent? Are we possessive of our treasure? Are we possessive of our time? Or are we willing to allow that fruit to be shared with the world? But it all begins with whether it's a good tree or a bad tree. Jesus is drawing the Pharisees and the scribes into this conversation, suggesting to them that perhaps the way they are uttering their words is a sign of their bearing bad fruit. And really what Jesus is pointing to in the context of Matthew 12 is back to what we were talking about before. They're using the law to put people down. They're using the law as a way to wag their finger. They're using the law as a way to show we are better than you. It's one of the challenges of being a church person, right? I mean, sometimes we can get a little puffed up about ourselves and say, well, aren't we a little bit better than, aren't I more spiritually mature than this person? Don't I, would that they could be like me. And that is often a crisis in the church. Paul had to deal with it over and over and over again. People who thought they were a little bit above, a little bit holier than thou, a little bit self-righteous, and the spirit of that resulted in bad fruit. It was bad fruit. Why? Because it was putting people down and not bringing people up. And that's always something for us to pay attention to. We scholars of the Bible, we can read our Bibles really well, and this will come up in a few verses, we can be really good students of the Bible, and we can bear really bad fruit. Anyway, verse 38, then some of the scribes and Pharisees said to him, Teacher, we wish to see a sign from you. But he answered them, an evil and adulterous generation asks for a sign, but no sign will be given to you except the sign of the prophet Jonah. For just as Jonah was 3 days and 3 nights in the belly of the sea monster, so for 3 days and 3 nights the Son of Man will be in the heart of the earth. The people of Nineveh will rise up at the judgment with this generation and condemn it because they repented at the proclamation of Jonah and see something greater than Jonah is here. The queen of the south will rise up at the judgment with this generation and condemn it because she came from the ends of the earth to listen to the wisdom of Solomon and see something greater than Solomon is here. So, what's all this about? The yearning on the part of scribes and Pharisees and such for a sign was a yearning for somehow Jesus to do something outside of who he was. This is not unlike what happens earlier in the gospel when Jesus and the devil are together in the wilderness and Jesus is being tempted and the devil says what? Show me a sign. If you are the Son of God, turn these stones into bread. If you are the Son of God, leap off the corner of the temple. If you are the Son of God, bow down before me, and I will give you all the kingdoms of the world. If. In other words, perform for us, Jesus. Give us some kind of supernatural, magic show, and then we'll believe. Then we'll believe. And then Jesus' response to that is, well, all I have is the sign of Jonah. Now, in the context of this gospel, where we are in the gospel, these words are not going to make a lot of sense to anybody, right? Because the sign that Jesus is suggesting that he has is the sign of Jonah, in that Jonah was inside the belly of the whale, the big fish, the sea monster, whatever. What do the translations have for that? Do you have sea monster?
Great fish. I have great fish.
You have great fish?
Sea monster.
What? Sea monster? Whale? Okay. Good. So some big, slimy, scaly creature. So Jonah is just as Jonah was in the belly of the whale, or the sea monster, 3 days and 3 nights, so it is that the Son of Man will be in the earth for 3 days and 3 nights. Now, again, it's like, what's he talking about? And which is perhaps more to the point of what Jesus is trying to get across, which is, the sign is me. And if you're looking to understand who I am, follow me. Follow me. I'm not going to be performing magic tricks. Now, Jesus is performing miracles, right? He's healing people. He is, walking on water. He's doing amazing. He's feeding 5,000. He's doing amazing things. But these are not signs. Jesus doesn't intend them to be signs. If he intended them to be signs, then all they would understand of Jesus was what he was able to do, what miracles he was able to perform. He was the miracle worker. It's certainly the way by which he garnered a following over the course of his ministry, but they were not. Remember how often we talked about the messianic secret? Remember that? This is extra credit. The messianic secret, which is when somebody receives a healing from Jesus, Jesus says, don't tell anybody, right? It's the secret. Why? Because that alone does not define who the Messiah is. The Messiah becomes revealed over the course of the journey. all the way to the point of Jesus going to the cross. And 3 days later, 3 days on the earth, and the resurrection. That you don't really know the story until you follow Jesus all the way to the end. So if you're looking for a sign, you're barking up the wrong tree, because the sign is me, and it's only as you follow me that you will come to know what does it mean for me to be Messiah. And what we know in hindsight on this side of the resurrection is that Jesus is revealing a very counter Messiah nature, very counter Messiah narrative, that Messiahs suffer, sacrifice themselves, give of their lives in order that others will be redeemed. This is not, at the end of the day, this is not Jesus waving a wand. From the very beginning of the gospel, God is not waving a wand. God is not doing tricks. God is coming in the vulnerable person of Jesus, who becomes vulnerable. This is the powerful thing about the gospel, that God makes God's self vulnerable, that Messiah reveals vulnerability, that God loves us so much that he makes himself vulnerable to us. In the vulnerable form of a little baby, the beginning of Matthew, all the way to the point of the vulnerable form of one who is arrested and who is tried and who is whipped and who is crucified. That this is who God is, because God's mission, God so loved the world, God's mission is to reveal the depth of God's love. That's the sign. And we see that sign, as we will see when we get to that point, we will see that sign in Jesus' willingness to go into the earth, to go into the tomb. And nobody understands it, right? Nobody understands it until Jesus comes out of the tomb 3 days later, and it is revealed that this is the way of the Messiah, right? But blessed are those who accept Jesus for who he is. The people in Nineveh, remember the story of Nona? Woo! Been a long day. Remember this? It's all right. What was that song? Remember the story of Jonah? Jonah is called by God, and what does Jonah do? Goes the other direction, jumps on a ship for Tarshish. He ends up being thrown off the ship and gobbled up by the sea monster, the big fish. And then he gets spit back up on land, and then he goes to Nineveh, and Nineveh takes Jonah at his word. You know what? If you don't repent, Nineveh will be leveled. And they take Jonah at his word. So much, in such a surprising way, that the person who's most surprised is who? Jonah. It's like, whoa, what's this all about? And he gets resentful and blah, blah, blah. But it's the preaching of Jonah alone on his own terms that is convincing enough of the Ninevites. And this is Jesus' point of saying, blessed are those who just take my word on face value and accept it and continue to take the journey with me. Which is a high calling, right? And it continues to be a high calling for us today, because we who are studying the Bible are here to try to understand what Jesus' word is for us, and we have to confess our our reluctance to take it at face value, to let it penetrate us, and to let it convict us, and to let it convince us, and to be the people that Jesus calls us to be. Hear this, ... for our well-being. You know, that's the Grand Canyon that a lot of us have a trouble with. Like, oh my goodness, really? Jesus wants me to do this? And then we stop the sentence there with a period, when what the rest of the sentence says is, Jesus wants us to do this for our well-being. That Jesus intends our well-being with these things. And when we begin to accept that, then we begin to follow Jesus more closely. Why? Because we know he is the one, he is the source of the abundant life. We know he's the one who is trying actually to make our life better. Not easy. Hear that. This is not prosperity Steve here. This is, Jesus doesn't want to make us richer. Jesus doesn't want to make our life easy street, a rose garden. No. He wants to invite us into the joy of sacrificial love. The joy of sacrificial love. It's not often that you get the word sacrifice and joy in the same sentence. Right? I think I've lost you. Look at him. What's he talking about? The sacrifice, the joy of sacrifice. Sacrificial love. I'm sure we can think about all the loves that we've experienced that have resulted in sacrifice. And the joy of knowing what we have done for the sake of other. What we have done. Parents sacrificing for their children, right? Friend sacrificing for friend. Spouse sacrificing for spouse. Not easy. But there's a joy that comes as a result of it. That I've invested. I have given myself over. And this is the joy that Jesus is inviting us into. That people can't quite see, these people who are listening to Jesus, they can't quite see until the end. Because when you're holier than thou and you are self-righteous, what the kind of Messiah you want is what? A Messiah who's going to help you put down other people. Help you make other people feel bad about how not good they are. That's the kind of Messiah that a lot of these people were kind of anticipating, like, oh, you're on our side. Oh, you're up here on our level. Oh, you're holy just like we are. And sure enough, there's got to be somebody underneath. And Jesus is counter that. He's lifting people up. And then he talks about the queen of the south, who will rise up at the judgment. This is Queen Sheba, who is in the great story of Solomon, where she is attracted to the teaching of Solomon. She, the pagan, and she is, but she is convinced of the wisdom of Solomon. And Jesus says, see, somebody greater than Solomon is here. Someone greater than Jonah is here. And it takes that leap of faith to begin to take that journey with the one whom Jesus is. Does that make sense? I'm not convinced. Okay. I'll leave room for some questions a little bit later on. Verse 43, when the unclean spirit has gone out of a person, it wanders through waterless regions looking for a resting place, but it finds none. Then it says, I will return to my house from which I came. And when it comes, it finds it empty, swept and put in order. Then it goes and brings along 7 other spirits, more evil than itself, and they enter and live there, and the last state of that person is worse than the first. So it will be also with this evil generation. Underneath all this is a lot of first century understanding, teaching, supposals about what the what the world of the evil spirits looks like, and how evil spirits come and go, and how vulnerable we all are to the evil spirits. And it's such, I think, profound teaching for us in this day and age, because it's something I think we all can relate to, which is that, again, back to these Pharisees and scribes who are taking such pride in keeping up their own little house, their own little part of the kingdom, priding themselves over how faithfully they follow the law, priding themselves over how holy they are, priding themselves. So they've done a really good job of sweeping out their house, but they've not done anything to prevent perhaps the most toxic, poisonous part of spirituality, which is, I'm better than you. And there's no, pride goeth before the fall, right? There's no place at which we are most vulnerable than when we think we're somehow better than everybody else. It's the person who thinks they're better than everybody else who ends up getting the comeuppance, right? They end up actually becoming the host of the evil spirit. I can tell you how many times I've been in Bible studies and there's been somebody who knows everything, who knows more than everybody else. Now, you're saying, well, who are you, McConnell? There you are sitting up there and teaching everybody, so maybe I'm the chief of the sinners. So I don't doubt that, and I need to shine light on myself before I shine light on anybody else. But I don't know if you've ever had that experience where you're sitting in a room and somebody says, well, somebody indicates through what they say or how they act that they know more than everybody else, especially about the Bible. And there's a spirit that comes out of that, right? It's like as good as you've attempted to make yourself, you've left yourself open to the return of the evil spirit, right? And you are denigrating other people by what you think you know, instead of being actively curious and caring and compassionate and in a spirit of servanthood when it comes to those who are in your midst. Was it nobody cares what you know until they know that you care? Right? Nobody cares what you know until they know that you care. That all of what we have for other people is first how to make them clear over how much we care before we try to convince them of how much we know. So there's a vulnerability, right, with this human condition that we live in, when it comes to how we steward the ways of God. If there's anybody that has it over and above all of us, it's the one who's going to the cross, right? It's the one who bends over and he washes the feet of the people who are going to betray him and deny him. It's the one who takes up his cross and goes to Calvary. If there's anybody that has it over us, it's the one who's actually put himself under us. And this is the way of Christ that we're being called to follow, all the way to the point of taking up our own cross and sacrificing ourselves for others. And just to finish out chapter 12, miraculously, while he was still speaking to the crowds, his mother and his brothers were standing outside wanting to speak to him. Someone told him, your mother and your brothers are standing outside wanting to speak to you. But to the one who had told him this, Jesus replied, who is my mother and who are my brothers? And pointing to his disciples, he said, here are my mother and my brothers. For whoever does the will of my Father in heaven is my brother and sister and mother. Well, this is something that all us parents really appreciate, this story of way Jesus refers to his mother and brothers and sisters. So what are we to make of this? I'm struck by these last words because they harken back, geez, I'm really losing it. They harken back to the end of the Sermon on the Mount when Jesus says, not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom of heaven, but only the one who does, quote, the will of my Father in heaven. On that day, many will say to me, Lord, Lord, did we not prophesy in your name, cast out demons in your name, do many deeds of power in your name? And then I will declare to them, I never knew you. Go away from me, you evil doers. Whoever does the will of my Father in heaven. It's interesting that these verses follow the verses that we just looked at, where Jesus says how vulnerable we are for the evil spirit to come. And the only way by which we can perhaps avoid being so vulnerable to the evil spirits is to do the will of our Father in heaven. It's not a matter of right thinking that keeps us away from the will of it keeps us away from the evil spirits. It is the way of right acting. We call it orthopraxy. Orthopraxy versus orthodoxy. Another one of those words. Oh, you are so excited to learn a new word. Orthodoxy. What is orthodoxy? What's it mean to be orthodox?
Real. To be real.
To be real, okay. Go ahead, Doris.
Right thinking.
Right thinking, right? You are orthodox when you think the right way. And if you think the right way, then you are, the church loves orthodoxy. Loves it. We love orthodoxy. We love right thinking. We love to fight over right thinking. We love to do battles over right thinking. We love to split the church over right thinking. I'm right, you're wrong, pal. Get out. We get so stuck up in our heads about whether we have it right when it comes to who God is. We have it right when it comes to what the Bible says. And when we kind of camp out in orthodoxy, we are bound to let the evil spirits come in. Because the evil spirit says, you're right. You know what? You're right. And you know what? That guy's wrong. And before you know it, better you not talk to him anymore. Better you cast him out because he's not thinking right. As opposed to orthopraxy, bet you can figure this one out. Huh? Well, being practical, orthopraxy is right practice. Right practice. And which is to say that we are called to do the will, just do it, do the will of my Father in heaven. And we're catching a sense of what the will of the Father in heaven, which is, let's make sure we raise up that leper. Let's make sure that we cure that blind man. Let's make sure that we feed the hungry. Let's make sure we be about orthopraxy. You can think what you think until the cows come home, but if you are not practicing your faith, in James it says, faith without works is? Boy, you're such a... Dead! Faith without works is dead, right? So if we are not practicing our faith, then it doesn't matter what kind of right thinking we have. And in fact, back to Matthew 7, those who say, Lord, Lord, and prophesy in my name and cast out demons in my name, but do many deeds of power in my name, I will declare to them, I never knew you. Go away from me, you evildoers, because you are not doing the will of my Father in heaven. And we talked about that, weeks and weeks and weeks ago, about how, there are a lot of people that want to say they are followers of Jesus, and maybe even show their own signs of being followers of Jesus, when in fact what Jesus is calling us to do is to bend and wash the feet, serve our brothers and sisters, feed the hungry. And a hungry person doesn't really care what you think. What they care is whether you got a bag of groceries, right? Maybe someday they'll wonder about what you think. Maybe someday they'll ask you why you do that. But it's only in the doing it that they'll become curious. Only in the doing it that they'll be eager to learn about why it is you do it. Do the will of your Father in heaven. And then the orthodoxy can sometime follow that. It's very seldom people get into fights over doing good things, right? Who's going to argue about feeding the hungry? Who's going to argue about caring for the sick? But we can sure argue over, interpretation of this verse versus that verse versus that verse. And I think Jesus is saying you got it in reverse. So whoever does the will of my Father in heaven is my brother and sister and mother. Now, Jesus is not trying to send some message that he doesn't care about his family. Jesus uses that as a way of making his point. Jesus often speaks in superlatives, right? He says something to the extreme in order to make a point. So he takes the occasion, again, not sure what his mother thought about this, but he takes the occasion to draw the analogy between his natural family and the greater family, and what does it mean to be a part of the family of God? It's those who are seeking to do the will of the Father in heaven. And throughout the ministry of Jesus, we come to learn more and more about what this will is. What does this will look like? All the way to the point of his sacrificial love revealed on the cross. Okay, you know what? I think I've got more to go on, but I'm going to stop there and just see. Sorry, Mengi, you just put you got the microphone. Thoughts, questions about that last half of chapter 12? Does it make any sense? You with me? It's okay if you've got, okay. I know I'm not that good a teacher.
Hold on, Jerry.
Here we go.
I have a perspective that I'd like to share. And I'd like your opinion on it.
Please.
When you talk about feeding people and housing them and giving them clothes and stuff, what's going to happen next week? They're going to be hungry again. Mm-hmm. But Jesus said, if you give them the food that I give,
right,
give them the water that I give, they'll never thirst again. So my perspective, and you probably already know this, is to bring them to Jesus, sure, rather than bring them to me so I can feed them, right, or house them or clothe them. I'm going to bring them to Jesus,
right,
and they'll never, because they're going to rely now on Jesus,
right,
who will provide,
right,
and they'll never thirst again. They'll never hunger again.
Right.
I haven't created a dependent. I've led someone to Christ, and they're now a child of God.
Right.
Or a dependent on Jesus. So what is your perspective on that concerning what we covered here?
Yeah, it's a great question. Thank you for that. And my answer to that is that I don't think it's an either or. I think it's a both and. And I think in large part what Jesus reveals in his ministry is that it is his acts of service to people that open them up to his teaching. And so it may very well be that we can find somebody and right out of the gate start teaching them about Jesus. But it could very well be that there's a lot of people for whom we have not gained a hearing because we haven't revealed the love of Jesus as we seek to reveal the truth of Jesus, the way of Jesus, the teaching of Jesus. So I don't think it's an either or, and I don't think one has to be in front of the other. But I think in the context of this teaching where Jesus is saying, well, you scribes and Pharisees, you're all about right teaching. And you really don't give two hoots or a holler about the people. And so I think in many respects Jesus is kind of turning that around and saying, minister to the needs of people so that they can experience tangibly the love that of the one, and to your point, is the one who provides the water of life, the one who provides the bread of life, the one who really provides the true sustenance of our lives. So yeah, I would definitely think one leads to the other, but sometimes it goes one way and sometimes it goes the other way. Does that make sense? Yeah. Steve?
So I spent maybe 20 years with Habitat, occasional weekends, And the thing that came through to me was, feed a man a fish and you give a man a fish and you fed him for a day. Teach a man to fish, right. You've, fed him for a lifetime.
Right.
So in whatever the church or, the good that we do in this world, it's good to give them some substance. I mean, Jesus made, a whole crowd of people lunch, right. Out of 5 fish. But he left a banquet for us for thousands of years now that we still feed off that table of the grace and the care that we want to afford others that may not have had the opportunities that maybe some others have had. So I think that also helps to explain, and I've also done a lot of, one-on-one or whatever, but it's in my heart, I feel that we all do a service to the world when we open our hearts to those who, have opportunities, whether it seems right to us at the moment, but it may seem also a little hypocritical at other times.
Okay. Yep. Judy? Yeah.
Thank you. I have been doing a lot of Bible study, more recently since I had my stroke. I think my relationship with God has gotten better because of it. Nice. But I'm doing it. I'm doing it by the upper room and the Bible. Sure. And I just got a new Bible with the teaching Bible. Yeah. And I've been a Christian my whole life, but I never was a Bible studier. Right. And I've had more time now since of my problems. And I think that much of it has to do with my interpretation of my readings, of that God speaks to me through them. Good. And I can only do that by relating to him. Sure. And to people I know, people I care about. Sure. And that's great. I'm glad for the fact that I've gotten to do more with the Bible. Great. And I want to keep on doing it. Wonderful. But great, that's wonderful. I would like to share that with others, but you have to do it. Yeah. You can't just say, oh, I don't get it. It
Right.
doesn't make sense.
No, right,
I
studying is
write
important.
notes now and I have a journal that has my name in it.
There you go.
Which says, Judy, whoever pursues righteousness and kindness will find life, righteousness, and honor.
Wonderful.
And I have had these for many years since my stroke.
Great.
And I enjoy the fact that my name is included in these scriptures, which I think God leads me to.
Wonderful.
Amen.
That's great. Amen. Amen. Yes. Wonderful. Any other, did I see any other hands? Okay. Doris, and then I'm going to just touch on a couple more verses. Go ahead.
Just a comment about the last section about the true family of Jesus.
Yeah.
One, you can get kind of annoyed with him for being more of a teenager than a 30-year-old
Right.
in terms of denying his mother and his family. But I think two things on that. One, I think part of it is to connect with other parts of the scripture that say if you're going to truly follow Jesus and live the gospel, your family might not understand that.
Right.
And that you might have to make that choice and, in a sense, leave them behind.
Sure.
Okay. But the other, for me, the more hopeful and the better reading of it, the less difficult reading, I think, is not to focus on who is not in his family anymore, but who now is in the family.
Right. Right.
Okay? And from their perspective, what that day meant, that now they belong.
Right.
And so it comes back to Sunday's sermon about knowing who you belong to.
Right.
And they were probably, so many people were hearing for the first time, I belong to him.
Yeah. Thank you.
So, so it kind of turns
Yeah.
those rough edges around a little bit.
Right. Right. Yeah. Thank you for that. That's a wonderful way of putting it. And I think it's a good point. And it kind of goes to show, I think what I imagine is a challenge for all of us. I know it's a challenge for me, is that I tend to be somewhat provincial over who are my people, right? I think that's sort of human nature, right? My people are my family, my little cluster of people that I'm either related to and by blood or related to in other ways. And that all of my energy needs to be poured into my people. And you can broaden that as much as you'd like to in terms of how we look at my people, right? Well, I'm an American, so I'm more concerned about my people, or I am a Presbyterian, and so I'm just concerned about my people. Or I go to church, and these are my people. And that's just that's human nature, right? Because we tend to be tribal, right? That's just how we're wired. The Pharisees and the scribes they were tribal, right? They were in their little club. I remember when we built a tree fort in our neighborhood, and it didn't take long, right, before it was our tree fort. And it's not your tree fort, pal. And before we know it, we had like World War III in the neighborhood because it was our tree fort and it wasn't your tree fort, and then all of a sudden it became their tree fort and it wasn't our tree fort. We're tribal, right? It's ours. It's our thing. And that just goes to show what this radical teaching of Jesus is, right? Because Jesus is calling us out of that, right? To Doris's point, he's calling us out to welcome all into our tribe. And that's just counterintuitive for us. And it's just, we don't necessarily want to think about people who are outside of our tribe. Nor do we really want to spend a whole lot of energy trying to get them into our tribe. But I think that's the calling that Jesus is calling us to, right? To somehow find the way to build bridges between our tribe and people outside of our tribe. Our family and people outside of our family. Our church and people outside of our church. And that takes a transformation of the heart, which is, back to your point, Gary, which is really what Jesus is all about, right? Transforming our hearts. We can do all kinds of good things, but if we're not confronting the very things within us that keep us from going outside of our tribe, outside of our little, holy huddle, then we are really keeping people from Jesus, right? We're keeping people from Jesus. But until we're willing to reckon with that as being kind of who we are, then we really won't be opened up to the work of the Holy Spirit in us to transform that, to make that into something different. And it usually goes in this cycle. The more you are amazed by the grace of Jesus, the more you wish for that grace to pour through you into the lives of other people, right? It's a transformative, it's a cycle. The more you are loved by God, the more you will be loving others because you have been loved by God. That's where you begin. It begins with the love of God. But that's a lifetime journey, right? Because, all the time, I've got all sorts of good reasons why I want to stay in my tribe. That's not what Jesus is calling us to. So, last thing. I'm not going to unpack all this because it's 23 verses long. I'm not even going to read it all. I'm going to recite to you Jesus' parable, which is in the first 9 verses of chapter 13, and kind of leave it as it is, in part because I have a question in the small group questions that's about these verses, so I at least have to read them, even without explaining them. But hopefully they will, and those of you in small group land, feel free to continue on reading through verse 23 because this is an interesting chapter because Jesus recites this parable and then he goes off and talks about why he teaches in parables and then he comes back later in verse 18 and following to explaining the parable. So it's all right if you go ahead and look at the explanation, verses 18 and following, while you are trying to discern the answer to the question I ask you about the soils. Make sense? Okay. The same day Jesus went out of the house and sat beside the sea. Such great crowds gathered around him that he got into a boat and sat there while the whole crowd stood on the beach. And he told them many things in parables, saying, "Listen, a sower went out to sow, and as he sowed, some seeds fell on the path, and the birds came and ate them up. Other seeds fell on the rocky ground, where they did not have much soil, and they sprang up quickly, since they had no depth of soil. But when the sun rose, they were scorched, and since they had no root, they withered away. Other seeds fell among the thorns, and the thorns grew up and choked them. Other seeds fell on good soil, and brought forth grain, some 100-fold, some 60, some 30. Let anyone with ears listen." Now, the only thing I want to say about this is that if you've spent any length of time in the church, you've already heard the explanation of the parable. Either the preachers told you it, or you have gone further on and read Jesus' explanation of the parable. But I think what makes us maybe most appreciate parables, and maybe also appreciate Jesus' subsequent teaching on the parables, is just to take this parable at face value. Because when you take this parable at face value and you put yourself in the shoes of people hearing for the first time in the first century, it's not easy to understand. You're really not, at least my sense of it is, you're really not sure what Jesus is talking about, which is, gets us part way to understanding what the nature of parables are. So I'm just going to leave it at that. Challenge you to kind of think about what this parable would sound like to you if you didn't quite understand really what its meaning is. And then once you read on, then perhaps that will inform your answer to the question that you'll get in your small groups. Okay? Make sense? Man, I don't think we served enough coffee tonight. I really think that's been the problem all along. So we'll have to ask Kathy to put a coffee pot at each table, and then we'll see where that takes us. All right, let me pray for us. Thanks, oh God, for your teaching, your hard teaching. We thank you that you are here to challenge us to live outside of our tribe and to not be so satisfied with what we know, but to be more curious about what we can do for the sake of your kingdom, so that more and more people will be curious about the love that flows through us to them. Bless us. In Christ's name, amen.